Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to our lecturers, Dr. Samsudin and our fellow friends. Today, our group choosing the topic selections of employees to be presented in this video. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Nurida Shanabi Kasim, and our group consists 5 members, which is firstly Muhammad Shahbizla, secondly Muhammad Shahiran, thirdly Muhammad Shahrian, and the last member is Yasmin Nonadira. Okay, first of all, I will discuss about the selection and below subtopic of selections will be discussed by other member. Okay. So what is selection? Selection is the process of choosing individuals who are qualified to fill existing or projected job openings. Other selections can be defined according to the Neil and Bolliger in 2007. They define the selection is the process of choosing individuals who have relevant qualifications to fill existing or projected job openings. Okay, selection and consideration consists two examples. Firstly is a person job fit. Person job fit is the job analysis identify required individual competencies cause for job success. Secondly is a person's organization fit. Person's organization fit, which is the degree to which individuals are matched to the culture and value of the organization. Why selection is important? Firstly, because of the performance. Employee with the right skill and attitude will do a good job at stage and productivity and revenue. Secondly, because of the cost. Cost is costly and time consuming to recruit employees. For example, is searching fees, interview time, a reference check, and other expenses. Thirdly, because of the legal obligations. Legal obligations is because to avoid negligent hurry. For example, is get relevant information about the applicants, verify all documents, keep detailed record, reject applicants who make a false statement. Next, I will discuss about the job analysis. Job analysis is the process of gathering and analyzing information about the content and the human requirement of job, as well as the content in which jobs are performed. The process is used to determine placement of job. For example, is job description, and the secondly job specification. Job description, example is a statement of the task, duties, responsibility of a job to be performed. And job specification is the statement of the specific knowledge, skill, and ability of a person who is to perform a job need. That's all for me. Thank you.
Selection is a process of picking individuals who have relevant qualification to fill the job in an organization. Selection is much more than just choosing the best candidate. It can attempt to extract a happy balance between what the applicant can and want to do and what the organization require. Basically, selection process consists of 4 major steps, which is initial screening, interview, post-interview screening, and selection decision. For case study of a selection process, we have choose the Shell company as a profit-oriented organization, a private company. Another one is Batu Gajah District Council, which is a public organization and non-profit oriented organization. For summarizing the best practice based on the case study for selection process, both organizations upgrade the service from conventional to digital cutter and full usage of technology advancement in daily operation. Based on size and number of employees, share lead the technology advancement in the selection process, saying there is a clear view provided for applicant regarding job description of job vacancy offer. This company developed its own systematic recruitment and selection via web for just-in-time information regarding the status of applicant is available for candidate. Even Batu Gajah District Council share the web page with other para government agency for vacancy. System can develop well and maintain the same function as Shell. Development of a web page and system increase the efficiency of human resource management for the organization and also for the candidate. For the second best practice, simple justification for interview is to get the best candidate that fulfill mental, physical and behavior. So do the job description with the acceptable time consumption. Shall implement multi-stage of interview process as a quality assurance for the successful candidate. And Batu Gajah District Council implement more simple stage of interview process with more time efficiency. Time taken for interview process affect the organization operations in nature of the position, whether urgent or not. Proper human resource planning help the organization entirely in terms of time taken for employees selection process. Same shall use virtual interview method, whereas Batu Gajah District Council use physical interview method. There is insufficient range for organization to understand and meet the applicant if interview process done virtually. Before interview process execute, Batu Gajah District Council prefer drug test and physical ability test to be done first. Here there is a best practice in applicant are free from drug abuse and have a physical strength that fit for the job. Hence, only qualified candidate who pass both tests able to sit for interview. It reduces time taken for organization, so candidate no need to wait for interview if not qualified. Other than multi-stage interview method, shall also use other method such as cognitive test and situation analysis to ensure potential employee meet their responsive requirement in the post-interview screening process. Information checking from source of reference only be done by Batu Gajah District Council. Insufficient information of candidate in post-interview screening will affect the decision made by the board or top level in the firm of decision making. Hence, some pre-employee tests need to be conducted, reliable and valid for offer position to help the organization overcome negligent hiring. Selection and decision is the last part of selection process before employee intake. Shall implement statistical approach method of selection, whereas Batu Gajah District Council implement clinical approach. Here, statistical approach is relevant to identify the best candidate instead of clinical approach. Element of quantified data is most important in comparison with a different judgment and bias from panel because quantity of available candidate is depend on the summary of all test score. So as a conclusion, there are 5 summarized best practice based on the case study from both organizations that can be implemented.
Hi, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. My name is Yasmina Nur Nadira. So today I would like to present to you about selection method. Next, we go to the employment interview. Employment interview, why is the interview is so popular? It is especially practical when there are only a small number of applicants. It serves other purposes such as public relations. Interviewers maintain a great faith and confidence in their judgment. Next is type of interviews. We have 7 types of interview, such as non-directive interview, structured interview, situational interview, behavioral description interview, sequential and panel interview, job-related interview, stress interview. So we will go one by one. We will go with the non-directive interview. So for non-directive interview is an interview in which the applicant is allowed the maximum amount of freedom in determining the course of the discussion, while the interviewer carefully refrains from influencing the applicant remarks. The interviewer will ask a broad questions or open-ended questions such as Tell me more about your experiences on your last job and allow the applicant to talk freely with a minimum of interruptions. The freedom affords to the applicant have uncovered information a candidate might not disclose during more structured questions. Next, we go to the structured interviews. Structured interview is an interview in which a set of standardized questions have an established set of answers is used. It provides a more consistent basis for evaluating job candidates and predicting their on-the-job performance. Structured interviews are also less likely than non-directive interviews to be attacked in court. Next, we go to the situational interviews. Situational interview is a variation of a structured interview, an interview in which an applicant is given a hypothetical incident and asks how he or she will respond to it. For example, if you're applying for the manager position, the interviewer will ask on how to manage their subordinate and what action to be taken to be able to reduce the turnover. Next, we go to the behavior description interview, or known as PDI. It's an interview in which an applicant is asked questions about what he or she actually did in a given situation. PDI is focused on actual work incident in the interviewee's past and what the applicant did in response. To assess a potential manager, for example, to assess a potential manager's ability to handle a problem employee, an interviewer might ask, tell me more about the time you disciplined an employee. BDI also assume that the past performance is the best predictor of future performance. The format also may be somewhat less susceptible to applicant faking the answers. Next, we go to the sequentials and panel interview. Sequential and panel interviews are very common. It's a format in which a candidate is interviewed by multiple people, one right after another. They allow different interviewers who have best interest in the candidate's success to meet and evaluate the person one-on-one. The interviewers later get tougher and compare the assessment of the candidates. Next, we go to the panel interview. Panel interview in which a board of interviewers question and observes a single candidate. After the interviewers poll the observation and their scores of the candidates. Because this interview involves input from multiple people, and they tend to be more reliable and accept fair by the candidates. Next, we went to the job-related interview, hard skill and soft skills. It's an interview tries to deduce what the applicant on the job performance will be by listening to their answers to the questions about the past behaviors. What do you consider? For example, if you're applying for an accountant position, the interviewer will ask, what do you consider to be the biggest challenge facing the accounting profession today? Or if you're applying for the administrative assistant, the interviewer will ask on, are you comfortable using a phone with multiple lines and handling a high volume of telephone calls? Next is stress interviews. Stress interview is an interviewing style that companies use to gauge a candidate's response to stress. The idea is that it gives the hiring team an idea on how you respond when juggling with various high priority tasks, dealing with challenging clients, or facing a difficult co-workers or managers. There are a few questions that the interviewer might ask is, how would you handle undeserved criticism from a supplier? What would you do if you saw a colleague stealing supplies or equipment? What would you do if a colleague admitted to lying on their resume to get the job? Next, we will go to the method of administrating interviews. So for individual interview is one-on-one or two people meet alone for interviews. For as we usually do, mostly common interview that many organization does. Panel interview is mass interviews. A panel interviews several candidates simultaneously by asking the question sequentially. Telephone interview is when the interview administrates through phone calls. Computer interview is using a computer program that requires candidate to answer a series of questions tailored to the job. Computer interview also is answered or compared either with an ideal profile or with profile developed on the basis of other candidate response. video and digital recorded interviews is using video conference technology to record and evaluate job candidates, technical ability, energy level, appearance, and the like before incurring the cost of face-to-face meeting. Usually, the applications that are used by the interviewer are mostly through Skype or webcam because it is low cost and very likely to be able to connect with other candidates throughout the geographical areas. Post-interview screening. After a candidate has been interviewed and appears to be a good potential new hire, information about the person's previous employment as well as the other information provided by the applicant is investigated. First, we will go to the checking reference. Reference check. Organization check the reference of the employees in a number of ways. Phone check or fast and make it easy for the reference to elaborate on the candidates. The most reliable information usually come from the supervisors who are in the best position to report on the applicant's work habit and performance. Prior to checking a candidate reference, the candidate must complete forms permitting information to be solicited from former employer and other reference sources. Next, we go to the negligent hiring. Negligent hiring is the failure of an organization to discover via due diligence that the employee it hired has the propensity to do harms to others. Next is source of information. Social security verification, past employment, educational verification, criminal records, motor vehicle records, credit check, and military record. Next, we go to the employment test. Employment test is an objective standardized test used to gauge a person's knowledge, skill and abilities and other characteristics relative to the other individuals. There are Next, we go to the employment test, an objective and standardized test used to gauge a person's knowledge, skill, abilities, and other characteristics relative to the other individuals. There are 11 types of tests. We will go one by one. First is job knowledge test. Job knowledge test is an achievement test designed to measure people's level of understanding or knowledge about a particular job. Work sample test is a sample test or job sample test required the applicant to perform tasks that are actually a part of the work required on the job. For example, include a map reading test for traffic control officers, a letter test for machine operators, and tests to determine if an administrative assistant understands Microsoft Office. Next is assessment center test, a process by which managerial candidates are evaluated at an assessment center as they participate in a series of situations that resemble what they might need to handle on the job. For example, candidates report to work at the assessment center and receive the usual steady diet of email and other interaction made with various role players who play different characters and handle manufactured events while they are observed and record. Next is cognitive ability test. Cognitive ability tests measure mental capabilities such as general intelligence, verbal fluency, numerical ability, and reasoning ability. Next, we went to the biographical data biodata test, which is collect biographical data test or biodata test, collect biographical information about the candidate who has shown to correlate with on-the-job success. Candidates are questions about event and behavior that relate attitude, experience, interests, skill, and abilities. Next is personality and interest inventories. Personality tests were the better predictor of their motivation, such as their leadership, efforts, and propensity to adhere to rules. But there are 5 5 personality traits, the known as Big Five factor, as follows. First is extroversion, which is the degree to which someone is talkative, sociable, active, aggressive, and excitable. Second is agreeableness, the degree to which someone is trusting, amiable, generous, tolerant, honest, cooperative, and flexible. Third is conscientious, the degree to which someone is dependable and organized and preserved in tasks. Fourth is neuroticism, the degree to which someone is secure, calm, independent, and autonomous. Fifth is openness to experience, the degree to which someone is intellectual, philosophical, insightful, creative, artistic, and curious. Next, we go to the polygraph test. Polygraph test or lie detector is a device that measures the change in breathing, blood pressure, and pulse of a person who is being questioned. Question typically covers such an item as whether a person used drugs, has stolen from an employer, or has committed a serious undetected crime. Next, we go to the honesty and integrity test. This is after the restriction imposed by the Employee Polygraph Protection Act. Employer has begun to using honesty and integrity tests. The question that might appear on integrity tests include the following: how likely will you be to be a report a coworker you discovered was stealing office supplies? Should an employee who lied on the applicant be fired if the falsification is uncovered? Next is physical ability test. For some jobs, employers need to assess a person's physical abilities, particularly for demanding a potential dangerous job such as those held by the firefighter, policeman. Physical abilities such as strength and endurance tend to be good predictors, not only of performance, but also of accident and injuries. Next is medical examination. A medical examination can only be given to ensure that the health of an applicant is fit for duty. The law prohibits it being administered to an applicant before he or she has made a conditional employment offer and agreed to undergo it. Next, and lastly, is drug test. Drug test to screen candidates who use illegal substances. Next, we go to the determining validity of tests. There are four types to determine validity of tests. First is criterion-related validity. Criterion-related validity is the extent to which a selection tool predicts or significantly correlates with important work's behavior. How well a person performed on the test, for example, is compared with his or her actual production records, supervisor's rating, training outcomes, and other measures of on-the-job success. Sales figures are commonly used for sales jobs. In production job, the quantity and the quality of output are likely to be the best indicators of the job success. Next, we have concurrent validity. Concurrent validity is the extent to which the test score of current employees correlate with their job performance. For example, a supervisor will rate a group of clerical employees of the quantity and the quality of their performance. These employees would then be given a clerical aptitude test, and their score will be compared with the supervisor rating to determine the degree of relationship between them. Next, we have predictive validity. Predictive validity is the extent to which candidate test score match criterion data obtained from them after they have been hired and on the job for a period of time. For example, candidates will be given clerical aptitude tests, which would then be filed away for later study. After the individuals have been on the job for several months, supervisors who should not know the employee test score are asked to rate them on the quality or the quantity of their job performance. Then their test score are then compared with the supervisor's rating. If the score and supervisor rating are in line with one another, the test has predictive validity and can be used to the test subsequent job candidates. But obviously, this approach to testing will take longer time to develop than the concurrent approach. Next, the last is cross-validation. Cross-validation is verifying the result obtained from a validation study by administering a test or test battery to a different sample drawn from the same population. Next is content validity. Content validity is the extent to which a selection instrument such as tests adequately samples the knowledge and skills needed to a particular job. For example, a test for accountant has high content validity when you require applicants to solve accounting problems representative of those found on the job. Asking an accountant to lift 60-pound box, however, is a selection procedure that has content validity only if the job description indicates that the accountant must be able to meet this requirement. And lastly is the construct validity. Construct validity is the extent to which a selection tool measures a theoretical construct or trait. Typical constructs are intelligence, mechanical comprehensions, and anxiety. They are in fact broad, general categories of human functions that are based on the measurement of many discrete behavior. Summarizing information about applicants. After getting the relevant information about multiple applicants, you have to systematically organize and evaluate it. Summary forms and checklists are needed. Next, we went to the selection decision. There are some selection considerations. Should individual to be hired according to the highest potential or according to the needs of the organization? Next, at what grade or which level to start the individual? Next is, should selection be for employee job match or should advancement potential be considered? Should those not qualified be qualifiable be considered? Should overqualified individuals be considered? What effect will a decision have on meeting affirmative action, plan, and diversity consideration? There are two types of approach under decision-making strategy, which is clinical approach and statistical approach. Clinical approach is using the clinical approach, thus making the selection decision review all the data on the applicants. Then on the basis of their understanding of the job and the individuals who have been successful in their job, they make a decision. Different evaluators will make different decisions about an applicant when they use clinical approach because each of them will make different judgment about the applicant's strength and weakness. Unfortunately, personal bias and stereotype are frequently covered up by what appears to be rational reason for either accepting or rejecting a candidate. Next is statistical approach. The statistical approach to decision-making is more objective. It involves identifying the most valid predictors and weighting them using statistical methods such as multiply regression. Quantified data such as score of rating from interviews, tests, and other procedures are then combined according to their weight value. Individuals with the highest combined score are selected. Compared to the clinical approach, the statistical approach has shown to be superior in a wide variety of situations. In statistical approach, there are five types of model, which is, first is compensatory model. Compensatory model is a selection decision model in which a high score in one area can make up for a low score in another area. Next is multiply cutoff model. Multiply cut-off model is a selection decision model that requires an applicant to achieve some minimum level of proficiency on all selection dimensions. Next is multiply hurdle model, a selection decision model in which only the applicant with the highest score at an initial test stage go on to the subsequent stages. Next, we have selection ratio. Selection ratio is the number of applicants compared with the number of people to be hired. And lastly is cut-off score. Cut-off score is the point in a distribution of score above which a person is considered and below which a person is rejected. Final decision is a selection of applicant by departmental or immediate supervisor to fill vacancy, notification of selection and job offer by the Human Resources Department.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone, my name is Muhammad Syarian Lee bin Jumat and I'm gonna present in this video presentation is how to determine the validity test. Validity. The most important consideration in evaluating an assessment method is its validity. For the present purpose, validity refers to whether or not the assessment method provided useful information about how effectively an employee will actually perform once she or he is hired for a job. Validity is the most important factor in considering whether or not to use an assessment method, because an assessment method that does not accurately identify who will perform effectively on a job has no value to the organization. There are two major forms of validity: question-related validity and content validity. There are several types how to determining the validity test. Criterion-related validity is a simple example will illustrate how criterion-related validity can be established. Assume that a sales job requires employee to have a higher level of customer service orientation, and an organization decide to implement a selection test that assesses prospective application on their customer service skill. In order to show that the customer skill assessment is a valid predictor of performance, it must be shown that individuals who score higher on the assessment perform better on the job, and individuals who score lower on the assessment perform less well on the job. Thus, validity in this case would be defined as a meaningful relationship between how well people perform on the assessment and how well they subsequently perform on the job. To measure the extent of the relationship between performance on a test and performance on a job, a correlation coefficient is used. A correlation coefficient is a statistical measure that indicates the strength of the relationship between score on an assessment and score on a job performance measure, such as performance appraisal rating. Correlation range from 0, meaning there is no relationship between how well individuals perform on an assessment and how well they perform on the job, to 1.00, meaning there is a perfect relationship between how well individuals perform on an assessment and how well they perform on a job. The highest scorer on the assessment receive the highest performance appraisal score. The second highest score on the assessment receive the second highest perform appraisal score, and so forth. Correlation coefficient that measure the validity of assessment method never reach 1.00 because the performance on an assessment can never perfectly predict how well individual will perform on a job. Other factors in validity influence job performance, such as an individual motivation, relationship with co-workers and supervisor, and a myriad of other factors. Assessment method that organizations typically use tend to have validity in the 30 to 50 range, although these are less than the maximum possible validity of 1.00. Assessment with validity in this range nonetheless provided very useful and valuable information for making selection decisions. As for example, if you are a salesman working at Proton, each company will set a target for each employee. If you reach the target, it means you achieve a good performance and you will get a lucrative bonus from your company. That is part of how the way some companies evaluate the work performance of their employees. There are two types of criterion-related validity, which is concurrent and predictive. Concurrent validity is the extent to which the test score of a firm's current employees correlate with their job performance. To test current validity, a firm obtains data from its current employees at about the same time that the test scores are obtained. For example, a supervisor would rate a group of clerical employees on the quantity and quality of their performance. These employees would then be given a clerical aptitude test and their score will be compared with the supervisor rating to determine the degree of relationship between them. Establishing the concurrent validity of a test prior to administering it to candidates can be quick and convenient because the firm has employees readily available to take the test. The drawback of this approach is that current employees have a great deal more experience, so their score may not be comparable to candidate score. Second is predictive validity. Predictive validity is involved testing candidates and obtaining criterion data after the individual have been hired and on the job for a period of time. For example, candidates would be given clerical aptitude tests which would be filed away for later study. After the individual have been on the job for several months, supervisors are asked to rate them on the quantity and quality of their performance. The test scores are then compared with the supervisor rating. If the score and supervisor rating are in the line with one another, the test has predictive validity and can be used to test. Content validity. The content validity approach is to validation involves demonstrating that an assessment provides a direct measure of how well candidate will actually perform the job. This type of validation requires thoroughly analyzing the job to identify the tasks that are performed and the KSAS that candidate must possess to perform those tasks effectively. The job analysis information is then translated into work sample tasks that mirror the tasks candidates are required to perform on the job. Content validity is established to a series of expert judgment which document that the assessment comprehensive measure the content of the job.
Selection decision. After collecting all information about the staff, the employers should provide checklists and summary form that show all information related to the employees. There are two strategies that can be applied for the decision making, which is the clinical approach and the statistical approach. For the clinical approach, the selection decision review all the data on the applicant. Different evaluator will make different decisions about an applicant when using this approach because different judgment about the applicant strength and weakness are analyzed. Meanwhile, the statistical approach is more objective, which involves identifying the most valid predictors and weighting using statistical method. Lastly, the final decision will be made by the manager or supervisor. HR personnel then notify the candidate about the decision and make a job offer. The chosen employees should be notified by the HR department about the detail of the job, working arrangement, and so on.